Good evening and welcome to the Easthampton Mayoral Forum. Before we start, I would like to introduce Williston, Northampton's head of school, Robert Hill III.
Good evening. On behalf of everyone here at the Williston Northampton School, I want to welcome you tonight to this mayoral debate. Sharing as much history as we do with the Easthampton community, Williston is delighted to host this important event, especially for our young people in the audience tonight. The debate captures the essence of American politics, and those who seek to serve in a public capacity represent, I believe, Williston's own mission statement ideals of purpose, passion, and integrity. Thank you to Mayor Tautznick and to Mr. Emerson for giving us tonight the opportunity to be witness to the best of our political process. Mr. Teller.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. And I'm Rick Teller. I'll be your moderator tonight. Right. While you all received blue forms on which you could submit a question for the candidates, and while I'm outlining the format of the debate, the ushers will come down. If you could pass them to the end of the aisles, the ushers will collect them. Our format this evening is pretty simple. After opening statements, the candidates will take questions from the panel in turn. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to speak, after which his opponent will have 2 minutes to respond. When a speaker has 30 seconds remaining, Mr. Mendoza will raise a yellow card, like so. And when his time has expired at the end of 2 minutes, Mr. Mendoza will raise a red card and I will call time. Okay. We will have 4 questions that were submitted to the candidates in advance, then 6 general questions appropriate to both candidates who will not have seen these questions in advance, then 4 candidate-specific questions, 2 for each gentleman, then as many of your audience questions as time permits. Chuck McCullough and 2 students will be selecting the audience questions from the stack that they're collecting now, primarily to ensure that we don't duplicate topics already asked. At the end of all of this, each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing statements. Before we begin, I should note that it took a small army of people and organizations to make this evening happen. Can't possibly name everyone involved, but I'd especially like to acknowledge the Easthampton Democratic Committee, the Daily Hampshire Gazette and the Republican, Easthampton Community Access Television, which will rebroadcast this event at 9 o'clock tonight and at, I believe, 8 o'clock every night the rest of the week, and a great many people here at the Williston Northampton School, notably Gina Terrell, Chuck McCullough, Jeff Tannett, Ed Schmura, and Tracy Wolf, and of course, Mr. Emerson, Mr. Tautznick, and your campaign staffs. Finally, so that we can include as much content as possible, please withhold your applause until the end of the program. So let's begin. Earlier this evening, we tossed a coin to determine the order of speaking. Mr. Emerson gets the first opening statement. We'll then alternate who speaks first in each portion of the program. So, Mr. Emerson, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see such a great crowd here tonight. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank Williston. I'd like to thank the Democratic City Committee, the Republican, and the Daily Hampshire Gazette, and especially for picking this place. I have fond memories here. My wife and I were married here, and at the time, our mothers were both still alive when we had the wedding. And all our families were here that night, and I made a speech that night too, so I guess probably pretty appropriate. My son said I make speeches all the time, putting 2 families together that night. Also, I'd like to thank Mother Nature. Maybe, I don't know if it's thank you or not, but for every one of my events, my announcement, my kickoff party, we've always had rain. So tonight there's no rain. We had a great day. I'd also like to thank the mayor for calling me a nice guy a couple of weeks ago at a New City event and saying that I make a good city councilor. Well, I think I'll make even a better mayor. I'd like to thank the students here, Easthampton High and Williston students from all over, from Massachusetts, Easthampton, and from the world that are here tonight. They don't usually get to see this. I thank you for being here tonight. I started with nothing. Quite frankly, I started by buying a lot, had a mortgage of $9,000, moved on to sell other lots, started being a businessman, buying apartments, paid mortgage. My daughter said we're in Poorsville because I had a mortgage to make on the house and a mortgage to make on the property I bought. Then Ashley Circle came along in the mid-'80s, 42 lots, 42 families living out there right now in Easthampton, paying taxes to our city, in a beautiful neighborhood. Then later on in the mid-'90s, went on to do a subdivision called Holly Circle, 32 homes. Now, beautiful subdivision also. People living there today, people paying taxes to the city of Easthampton, and also left in a very nice condition, very nice homes. Then, I'm sorry, I've been red carded.
I'm sorry. Mr. Tosnick, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Teller. I also want to say thank you to our host, Williston Northampton School, to the press, and to ECAT, in particular to ECAT. They're a wonderful local access television station, and I want to thank especially the subscribers who pay for their operations. I believe I should be your mayor, and I should continue to serve as your mayor for these reasons. I have a vision for our future that has been shaped by our community. I've listened continuously to the people in our city, and I actively support their ideas and ambitions. By working together, we have been successful in making Easthampton's shared vision a true reality. I've embraced innovations in every aspect of our government. I've been part of the team of city workers and citizen volunteers that have been at the forefront of new ideas and the use of new technologies. We've made intelligent use of limited resources available, and we've saved thousands of dollars in doing so. I'm fiscally responsible. I've delivered balanced budgets that keep the city running smoothly each and every time, year in, year out, including during these tough economic times. I listen to the needs of the community, and I work with our staff and our department heads to deliver effective local services, all within the means that we have available to spend. I work tirelessly to find new funding opportunities for all the needs that we can't afford under our regular general budget, and I work persistently to try to achieve our capital goals. I'm a community supporter. I couldn't be more proud of that part of my work and what I do here in the city. I support and encourage business activities here at all levels. I actively promote all of our local events. I attend most of them that I can. And I embrace the arts as an integral part of this community, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. I have positive working relationships with other elected government officials, including Governor Patrick, Lieutenant Governor Murray, Congressman Olver, and Neal. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Okay, I'm sorry, yes, your time has expired. I apologize, but, all right. We now have 4 questions which were submitted to the candidates in advance, and Mr. Tosnick gets the first question.
Mayor Tosnick, after being elected to a 7th term as mayor in 2009, you vowed to work harder to make people feel more included in city government. You had said receiving 49% of the vote in a 4-way race was not a mandate, and a lesson you learned in that election. Explain what you've done since then to keep that promise.
Sure. As you know, Dan, because you covered myself available whenever I can. Debbie and I are often out on the town, and I take time when people want to come up and ask questions and give them an opportunity. I listen to their concerns, and I try to direct them where I can go. But during this past term, we've really focused on updating the city's website so that we can include more information and so that it can be more timely. We've made an attempt to make it easier for our staff to be able to post information. As a matter of fact, we made it so easy that during Hurricane Irene, I was the one who was putting the notice messages up on the internet while we were in the command center. So if I can do it, anyone can. We've also included a blog on the mayor's site. So if you go to the city's website and you go to my department, you'll find a blog from my office that helps to keep citizens informed about what's going on. And just to make sure that we were covering all the bases, as you know, I also created the personal Facebook profile, and I actually use that profile to respond to questions when I'm not at work. So I've tried to make myself as accessible as I can possibly be, except when I'm sleeping. In addition to that, we've used the money that we collect from the cable television subscribers to create a brand new television studio at 50 Payson Avenue so that we can put more of the programming that we have available on live. So now we're able to show live city council meetings and live school committee meetings, thank you, from 50 Payson Avenue, and we're working to put a staff position in place using that same money that can't be spent for anything else because it's dedicated to just for television, so that others can figure out what's going on and to try to stay involved. And by the way, since the last election, I've been told by political consultants that 49% in a four-way race is pretty good.
Thank you. Mr. Emerson, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Yes. I've been going throughout the community after deciding running for mayor, and I've had many people come up to me, and thankful that I need for citizen involvement, actually, and for involvement with the business community input. And I don't remember that promise that the mayor had made, but from what I'm getting from the citizens, they don't feel that that's true. And they feel that there is more communication needed, and that's one of my big themes and has been at the beginning of my campaign, is communication with the public. Community presence and support. That's my tagline, and that will be the way I'll be as a mayor. I will have an open door policy, as I had when I was a captain in the police department. I had an open door policy, citizens and employees. I plan to continue that as mayor of this city. And I will continue to reach out to all the friends, citizens, taxpayers of Easthampton for input in every single project that I go after. The mayor has had projects that have been successful. Some also that he didn't even start or was involved, but took credit for it. He also did not get city input on some of this, citizen input, excuse me. For example, there is the solar project where solar people told me afterwards they wish they had more citizen input prior to it. Even though it's a good project, I believe in solar. Just looked at it for my own house this summer. So I'm a believer in solar. It's just how things go about is how I feel it should change. Thank you.
Mr. Emerson, the next question is for you.
Yes, thank you. On the infrastructure. As we all know...
I'll ask it.
Let him ask the question.
Oh, sorry. I know the question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, these are in advance.
They don't.
Only 2 questions they know.
Right.
You said in a recent candidates forum that you would more aggressively seek grants to improve the city's infrastructure. Of the city's infrastructure, what specifically needs improvement the most? And explain with specifics how you would find the money to make these improvements.
That's an easy question to answer. The roads, they haven't been kept up. I was told by employees of the city that if we had do 5 miles of road a year, that we, would after 20 years have every road taken care of. But obviously that's impossible to do with the fiscal finances of the city and the state. I would look into ways of prioritizing along with the DPW commission. We have commissioners in the DPW that make these decisions, but I would speak to them and try to work together on prioritizing streets that are either worse or some major routes that need it more than others. I've been in contact already with our senators and our representatives and our congressmen. I've been in contact with Senator Brown, Representative Oliver, Congressman Oliver, and also State Representative, State Senator rather, excuse me, Knappich, and Representative Skybeck. I've already been in contact with all these people. So I hope to work for you, and I've said this before, and I truly mean it, as your ambassador, and work hard on trying to get grants and state funding and find more funding for our roads to make our cities much safer and much better. Thank you.
Well, a lot of lack of specifics. 5 miles of road will cost $2 million or more, depending on how it's constructed. The group that does the public works is a board of public works, and they actually all of the projects that we do are contained in the master plan. 5 years of citizen input to create a plan moving forward. You'll find solar energy there, Mr. Emerson, if you take a look at it. We spend, in the last 3 years, we spent $1.9 million on our streets. It's not enough. Clearly, it's not enough. But the decisions we have to make are, do we hire police officers? Do we hire teachers? Pave roads? There's a finite amount of money, and I would love to promise you that I'm going to pave your street and your street and your street tomorrow. But I'd be lying to you. We do seek as much grant money as we can. If you take a look at my website, mayormike.net, you'll see the Lieutenant Governor's endorsement. And Lieutenant Governor will tell you that I've been one of those forces that were lobbying the state for more Chapter 90 monies. Chapter 90 is the grant funds that we use to pay for roads. And that fund has gone up by $50 million this year to $200 million. Now, it's not enough. Statewide, it's still not enough money. I hope that when you talked to Senator Brown, you suggested that he should change his vote on the president's stimulus package, which contains road money, specifically money for cities and towns right across the nation to hire police officers, teachers, and to repair our infrastructure. Thank you.
Mr. Tosnick, the next question is for you.
Thank you.
Downtown businesses have often closed only shortly after opening. What, if anything, would you do to prevent this if reelected?
You rewrote your question. You know, I think that Easthampton is really a hub of activity, and much of our commercial growth revolves around the creation and expansion of small businesses. In downtown, we see a continued renaissance in downtown, a lot of small businesses starting, and you're right, some of them aren't successful. But opening and closings don't necessarily mean a bad thing. For example, a fairly large retail business was recently closed or sold, and the owner of the building decided that he didn't need a large building in downtown, and he ended up selling it, and it's been turned into condominiums. And so now there are 4 storefronts where there was 1, and all 3 of those have now filled. So openings and closings are actually sometimes a very good thing. You want to encourage people who are looking to make an investment or start a business. You don't want to try to suggest that maybe you shouldn't open in Easthampton because maybe you'll close in Easthampton. You want to encourage them to come. And so our vision of the future is to make downtown even more of a destination, more of a hub of pedestrian-friendly activity, and that sort of leads into the boardwalk idea and the effort that we want to move forward with to try to create a destination here in Easthampton, even more than we have. Many of you remember the Bear Fest. We're going to have another one in 2012. It brought people to the community, and every business person said that it helped their bottom line. But we need customers. We remember the days when we had 4,000 employees on Pleasant Street, and the mills worked 2 or 3 shifts, and at 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you couldn't drive through Easthampton because there were too many people going to and from work. But we had lots of stores, so we recall that, and we say, well, why can't we have that today? We can have it today, but we need to give people a reason to come. It's important to create a destination. People want to come to Easthampton. It's a wonderful community. We offer some of the greatest assets in the valley here in Easthampton, right here, and we need to polish them a little. We need to try to make sure that people know that we're here to serve them.
Time. Mr. Emerson, you may respond, please.
Yes, thank you. Also, since I've taken on this mayoral campaign, I've talked to many people. I've been told that some businesses actually had trouble getting into Easthampton in the process. And I've said this before at other forums. I'd like to make the process easier for business to come to Easthampton. And instead of going from point A to point B, back to point A again, make it easier for them to get into Easthampton, embrace them, foster a relationship with our present businesses, which will create more businesses in Easthampton. We need business. We have over 300 businesses in Easthampton, and we need them to help support our city. So as I said many times, I would foster this relationship and looking to making the permitting process easier. And I know for a fact we have lost some businesses because they were disgusted with the process and with the system, and they've left Easthampton to go on to other places. So I never want to see that happen if I'm mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Emerson, you get the next question.
School choice spending is about 5 times as high as the amount it brings in. What would you do if elected to reverse that trend and make Easthampton's public schools more attractive?
Thank you. I have 1.3 million goes out every year for school choice. My job would be to work with a school committee to address the issues that people have given in the studies that we've had. And some were social issues, lack of buildings, and other things. But there was not a priority given, but there's many reasons why. And having initiatives, I have an adopt a school plan, if you adopt a classroom plan that you may have heard of too, in which today's caring and dedicated teachers are taking more money out of their pockets to pay for school supplies in classrooms. My adopt a school plan will help them with this. I plan to give each classroom $100 for school supplies. And in this, I would seek citizens' involvement with fundraising and businesses. And anything that lacked, I would make the difference up personally to guarantee that all our classrooms would have this $100 for supplies. I'd encourage the school committee to work with City Hall and the City Council. We have great teachers, and I would be an ambassador to the schools also, attending the meetings. I don't have only a 1/7 vote, I understand that, but I would attend and try to have my influence into making things change in Easthampton, and not just be a school of choice. Easthampton would be a choice of schools. Thank you.
Mr. Kosnick?
Thank you, Mr. Teller. School choice and charter cost us $1.8 million, not 1.3. If you give $100 per classroom, you're bringing back $9,000. It's wonderful, great idea. It just doesn't really fit the bill. We're building a new high school. That's going to have a major influence on people's choices. But people's choices, as Mr. Emerson said, are not as clear-cut as we might think. Parents choose to send their children to schools for lots of reasons. Sometimes it's convenience, sometimes it's for a particular purpose. A particular school offers something special. We have a lot of students from Williston that go to a Chinese school. We would never be able to match that. That's a charter school. Our plan is to improve the buildings. We are working on the high school. We have the improvements for the middle school in front of the Massachusetts School Building Authority as we speak. And that program is really being driven by the superintendent of schools, who is the person who is responsible ultimately for what happens in the schools department. And the superintendent is the person who really needs to be the point person on how do we get around the problem that we're having with school choice. Now, we're not the worst community. Greenfield, in the valley, Greenfield is really the community that's being hurt the most by charter and choice. But all communities that have more money going out than coming in are having a problem with that. And the final piece that we're going to work on are the elementary schools. The voters in Easthampton have been very, very generous. We're proving to them that we can be very responsible with their money. We're going to bring in the high school for under budget. We saved money on the financing, and we're going to ask them in 6 or 7 years, I think, to give us elementaries.
Thank you. We now move to 6 questions which the candidates have not received in advance. These are intended as general, not candidate-specific questions. And the first question goes to Mr. Emerson.
For years, the city's plans were to renovate the high school and build a new elementary school, plans which later evolved into building a new $44 million high school now underway. Given that it took more than 10 years for this project to happen, what do you see as the next priority for new school building projects in Easthampton? Where do you see the city's more than century-old elementary schools fit into those plans, and when should this work get started?
We have, as you all know, we have the public safety complex. We're still being bonded right now. We moved there in 1999. I feel we should move on to a central elementary school, although there are a lot of issues for people that like to have the neighborhood schools too. But what I see is probably an elementary school set by itself. I've been to other communities. Belchertown's one of them if you've been there. I go to sports, and they have a complex of schools going up the hill. So does Ware. And I visualize an elementary school like that set in a separate location, and busing will be simple. There'll be teachers all in one place, one principal and one vice principal, and have the elementary school set aside separately. Look for bonding in a couple of years and move forward with that as soon as possible with the committees. We already have a school building needs committee in place, and use their talents and start the process. It'll take many years just to come to a decision on location and on what we're going to do, and obviously what the architecture of the school will look like, but and get citizens' input. I think that's the important part, to see what they want to do. I'm told it'll cost a lot of money to refab our old schools and bring them back to what they need to be for code today. I attended Maple Street School myself. I did 1 year at what the Pepin School is now, before moving into what I call the new high school. And then today, hopefully, we can move forward into, every time you yell a card, man. Today we look into going on forward into more elementary schools, another elementary school, excuse me, set by itself. I have a location in mind, maybe the mayor does too. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I ignore that yellow card.
Mr. Tosnick, you have...
Certainly, sir. The next priority is the middle school. As you know, we've been doing some work as we could afford it. We put a new roof on about 7 years ago. We've repaired the pool building and the pool itself, but the air handlers are original equipment. So the building was built in 74, 75, and so we've got 35-year-old air handlers on the building, and they're in terrible shape, and that's why the pool is not open. So we've got that project in front of the MSBA, and the MSBA will dictate how we move forward with it, and they're good at that, but that'll be our absolute next priority. The public safety complex is going to start coming off the tax rolls in 2017, and so that should be our target date for the elementary project. We have selected a location. Actually, there was a futures committee that was created by the school committee in 1999, and that's where the high school came from, and during that process, we also worked on the elementary school needs, and there are 2 camps in the community. One camp is to rehabilitate a couple of the older 100-year-old schools and try to go forward that way. The other camp, and I think the way that I lean, is similar to my competitor, and that would be to build a single elementary. The location would be off of Treehouse Circle, off of Park Street. We own the property. It's sized sufficiently enough. It's been identified by everyone who's been involved in the process to date as an adequate location and a good location, fairly close to Whitebrook, but not quite a campus school. And I think that we should be able to use the leverage that we're going to be able to not leverage is the wrong word, the savings that we're going to be able to show by reducing the public safety complex debt on the tax rolls, to talk to the voters about bringing new debt in to replace that in the tax base. Thank you.
Okay. The next question is for Mr. Tosnick.
If the city were to receive an unexpected $200,000 in unrestricted state aid, what would you use it for?
I don't know that I would make that decision. I'll give you an answer, but the answer really needs to be created by a team, and that's how we work here. This isn't an autocracy. I'm not a king. We make our decisions based upon input from all of our departments. $200,000 sounds like a lot of money. It's not significant. If it's only going to come once, then you really have to consider using it for one-time expenditures as opposed to bringing back staff or bringing back hours, and paving the roads might be a good spot for $200,000, but it wouldn't cover very much. We're doing South Street from Maine to Glendale. It's $320,000. It's a short stretch of road. And so I don't know exactly what we do with $200,000. If I had my druthers right now, we'd put it into capital. So without talking to staff, without running it by the finance director, without talking to all my department heads, I would add it to our capital expenditures, and my guess is that roads would end up coming out high.
Mr. Emerson?
Thank you. I agree with the mayor as far as I would have a staff meeting, which I plan to have regular staff meetings and employee meetings when I become mayor, and get their input on everyday things, actually, too, and running of the city hall. But I'd also talk to citizens that if we had $200,000 given to us out of the blue, I would also get input from citizens and from the employees. But I think I would tend not to keep it for capital, to be quite honest with you. I think right now we have the glaring roads right in our face. And I have checked on this. 1 mile of road to what they call mill and fill is $500,000. And to do the complete reconstruction of a road is $900,000 per mile. So you could get about a mile of road completely milled and filled with the $200,000. I think some of our roads are bad enough that we could use the $200,000 for road. But I wouldn't make the decision myself. I would leave it up to the citizens and the staff, but I would actually, if it was up to me, I would do it with roads. I'd spend that $200,000 surplus on roads. Thanks.
Mr. Emerson, the next question is for you.
Mr. Emerson, you've had a supervisory role up until recently in the city, like the mayor. City employees who provide services to the public have not been immune to the financial hardships borne by other citizens in these tough economic times. Over the years, they've been asked to take furloughs, they've been asked to pay more for health insurance, and in recent years take pay cuts with the closing of city offices on Fridays. How would you describe the state of employee morale in the city? Are people happy working here? And if employee morale needs boosting, as it often does in organizations, how does a mayor go about facilitating that?
I'll be quite honest, the morale is low in the city of Easthampton at this time. And I think it's more than just money. If you're a good manager and administrator, and I think all of you out there know you've all had jobs, it's more than just money. In studies, it's money and appreciation. Those are the two highest things that people really want from a supervisor, from a boss, from a manager. And at this point, I don't think they're getting the appreciation that they need to get. And I think that I would bring that to the job if I become mayor. And that would help the morale. Number one, you'd have a better employee. And number two, you'd have a happier employee who would serve the city better, who would serve the city better on a daily basis. And it would mean less sick leave probably, it would mean less trouble with citizens and taxpayers, and it would serve them better in a friendlier manner. What I plan, when I become mayor, is to have a staff meeting immediately with all the staff and to sit down and talk about being a more friendlier City Hall and more hours at City Hall. I'm not saying our people are not friendlier now, but I've heard some stories on certain individuals, and I think that we can do better in City Hall. And I will strive to make it a friendlier, more comfortable place to come and do your work, pay your bills, and do your permits in Easthampton when I'm mayor. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Tosnick.
I keep hearing heard some stories. I'm going to look for that fairy book. The employee morale is not low in Easthampton. Employees in our community understand very clearly what we're going through. We have absolutely some of the best staff you'll ever find working in our buildings, working for our departments. I can't say that the folks that sit with me at the bargaining table are particularly happy, but times are tough. And I have to act on your behalf. And I have to say no sometimes. Sometimes you just don't have that choice. We do try to appreciate our employees anytime we can. I hold a picnic every summer for the employees. We invite all of the employees in town. Mostly we get employees from 50 Payson Avenue because that's where I hold a picnic. Sometimes we'll get employees from other departments, but they're all invited and they can come or they don't have to. We hold birthday parties once a month. We have a big joint birthday party. We try to do as much as we can to make working in Easthampton a friendly thing. The camaraderie is amazing. One of the things that did hurt morale is my opponent suggesting that we're going to go back to an 8 to 4 work week, except it's only going to be till, I guess, noon on Fridays, which really does a disservice to the employees because they're still losing 8% and now they've got to work the extra day. And secondly, it doesn't help the citizens because closing at 4 like we used to is pretty useless if you don't live here. So if you're used to living here all your life and working here all your life, you think 8 to 4 is great. We really have talked about it internally, and when we can bring the money back, we're probably going to not go to an 8 to 4 5-day week. We're going to look at night hours. We're going to look at trying to make hours that people who work out of town can actually make. Couples come in to get marriage licenses. 2 people have to come together. They both have to take a day off today if they work out of town 8 to 5 because we're closed.
Hey, Mr. Tosnick, you get the next question.
Yes, sir.
Citizens who want second opinions about reports or decisions issued by public bodies often have to pursue and pay for them on their own. For example, the opponents of the Parsons Village Affordable Housing Project had their own engineering study conducted when they disagreed with the city's findings hired their own attorney to combat the development, and paid all the fees associated with an appeal of the developer's notice of constructive approval. They have argued that these are the city's duties. Do you feel the same way, and if so, do you have any plans to change that model if elected?
Yes and no. So in the instance of the planning board decisions, unfortunately, I think that the Parsons Street group got some poor advice from their attorney. They really didn't need to appeal that letter that came out. And the city will defend the decision not to allow the project to move forward. In a discussion at the Apollo, part of what's being sponsored by the New City Association. We had kind of a long conversation about this, and I'm sure I don't have time to go into that whole thing, but I encourage people to get on the planning board, especially now, because our planning board is going to be vacated pretty quickly. Mr. Ogilevich is running for city council. That's going to be a vacancy. Mr. Quinn has stepped down. That is an existing vacancy that we're hoping to fill. I understand that another member who's up for reappointment in January is likely not going to get reappointed. It is the responsibility of the members of the planning board to understand the laws that they work with and to appropriately follow through on that. I don't know that we can or would want to step on the right of people to appeal, but it would be helpful and it would be great if we had money to bring a second engineering position into the community to be able to provide direct staff assistance. In lieu of that, we're bringing a second planning position in so that we can focus some of the planner's efforts away from the economic development portion of his job and more to the staff support, but we're stretched very thin. As I think most of you know, we have one planning position that services several boards and committees. So we depend a lot on the members of the boards and committees, the people who are the decision makers under law, to be able to understand the laws that they work with. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get through the Parsons Street project as well as whatever other appeals. But I want to make a point that folks have said something about not being business friendly. We have not turned around any businesses except for Stop and Shop 1 and this project. Thank you.
Time has expired. Mr. Emerson, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you. First of all, I would try to keep this out of court in the first place if I was mayor, and I would try to talk to people and work things out possibly. I thought maybe if the planning board did approve Parsons Street Village, no matter how you felt about it, it might have been better if we had local control over it instead of going to 40B. But I talked to planning board members myself and I felt that might have been the better way to go, even though it didn't pass, obviously. But I am in favor, obviously, of the housing, but it's just how it's done. And I would look it over differently. And obviously, you're the mayor, you're not the planning board. But you could have input. You could still be an ambassador out there looking for different things and trying to work together with the citizens of New City to see what they were looking for, what they wanted in there, and save all this court action. That's my feeling on the subject.
Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Emerson.
It's widely accepted among environmentalists and conservationists that removing a dam is one of the most effective ways to restore a natural river and fish species habitat. As a director of the conservation group American Rivers recently put it, removing dams is really our #1 river restoration tool around the country. Engineers for the city determined that the city's Manhan Dam or Northampton Street Dam serves no useful purpose. In your view, should the city have looked closer at removing the dam rather than build what is approaching $1 million project with cost overruns? Federal grants are available to do this work. Secondly, how will the city in these difficult financial times maintain the latter and monitor the species using the apparatus?
That's a very good question. First of all, I dealt in my subdivision experience with rivers and streams and rules of working around it, so I don't know, if you could tear a dam down, obviously, maybe you can. I would see if we could, I would have gone for tearing the dam down first, to be quite honest with you, than doing the fish ladder. And if that's possible, I don't know the level of river, I don't know a lot of things that I'm not privy to that would make it possible to do the dam lowering. So if that's possible, I'd be more in favor of demolishing the dam and having the natural river flow. I'm also not an expert on fish ladders, that's for sure. But I would have done things differently probably. I wouldn't have gone for the project. I realize it's federal funding, I understand that, and could be used just for the fish ladder, I know. But I probably would have used my time and energy in seeking out other avenues instead of using them going to the fish ladder. I would have been going for other things, including looking into probably destroying that dam and recreating the original stream, the original Mandan River. Thank you.
Mr. Tosnick?
Well, yeah, I'm the one who's building a fish ladder, so let me tell you about it. We began the project as a kind of an offshoot from the Nashwanek Pond dredging project. The Federal Fish and Wildlife Service was here doing a review on the pond dredging project, and they brought the issue up to us saying, you know, we really want to get fish over this dam, and there's some endangered species above the dam, so we really are concerned. We don't want to eliminate the pool because the pool supplies the habitat for the endangered species. So would you consider looking at it with the Corps of Engineers to figure out if there's a way to get fish, migratory fish, around this obstruction? And we said, sure. And when you work with the Corps of Engineers on that kind of a program, it's free up front. You pay them if you actually implement with their program, but it's free up front. So it was like, sure, take a look. So they did. They did a study. It was published, I think, in 2002 or 2003. They looked at all the options. They looked at 4 or 5 different kinds of fish ladders. They studied whether or not you could replace the endangered species habitat and do something else. They came back with a recommendation that the thing that they would suggest, this is the Corps of Engineers, is that we build a Danielle-type ladder, which essentially is like a fast-flowing stream made out of concrete. We said thank you very much, and we put the report on the shelf because we didn't have any city money for that project. It didn't come high enough to the top to take our taxpayer money, our general fund money, the money we spend for police, teachers, firefighters, roads. Then when the ARRA money came out, the Federal Fish and Wildlife Service came into town and said, you know, we did this work, City Council approved it, they actually put a deed restriction on the property when they sold it saying we want to build a fish ladder, and they offered us money to do it. We said sure. And they're looking for more now. So we should be able to finish that next year.
Thank you. Mr. Tosnick, the next question is yours.
For the sake of context, Mayor Tosnick, you were recently endorsed by Lieutenant Governor Murray, and you've been endorsed by D.A. Sullivan. You've also been endorsed by several city councilors, local business leaders. What do your endorsements mean to you, and how will that support influence your management of the city, if at all, if you are reelected?
Well, if you go to my website, mayormike.net, you can listen to the endorsements on video. What it means to me is that the people I work with think highly of my capacity and want me to come back. The people that endorse me are not necessarily folks that I'm going to make decisions about wages or that sort of thing. So there's no quid pro quo if that's where your question's leading. I work with all of these people day in, day out, whether it's the lieutenant governor or the district attorney. The district attorney was our attorney during some very trying times in the police department, and so he knows us both very well, and I appreciate his support. I've known David for a very long time. I've known Tim Murray since 2002. I work day in and day out with my city councilors. Some are endorsing my opponent, some are endorsing me. It really, in my mind, it means job well done, keep it up.
Mr. Emerson?
Thank you. I've stated before at other forums, I'm not a politician. I never was, I never needed to be. That's probably why I didn't get the politician's endorsement. I did get union groups, as you know, but you don't give away the house. I think they just want somebody, I know they just want somebody they can come and negotiate with and talk to. We have spent a lot of money on negotiations, a lot of money. You can see it in the budgets over the years. I don't plan to give away the house, as my opponent was kind of getting at. I plan to meet with people, negotiate and talk, all part of my communication plan with everyone, including the unions. I'll talk to everyone. I'll get citizens' inputs on this too. Sure, I was a police officer, but as mayor, I'll have the taxpayers' back. I had police officers' back before, I'll have your back now. And that's what I'll do as mayor. I'm not going to give away the house. I'm going to talk to people, save money, hopefully, on lawyers' fees. I know you need a lawyer sometimes when things are complicated, but I would meet up front. I've negotiated contracts over the years personally. I was union president for 7 years, negotiated 3 contracts. I'm certainly not a beginner in that area, and I plan to use that experience and skills and leadership in bargaining and with employees. And so I appreciate my endorsements, whether they be personal or union.
Thank you. Each candidate will now be asked 2 questions specific to him. His opponent will have 2 minutes to respond. Mr. Tosnick, the first question is for you.
Mayor Towsnick, in program literature you submitted tonight, biographical information, you say that you'd like to serve 2 more years as mayor and to, quote, transition the next administration to someone who has direct experience and the skills to run a municipality. Isn't it voters who decide when the next mayoral transition occurs? And in indicating that these may be your last 2 years in serving if elected, why shouldn't voters look for new leadership now?
If it ain't broke, the 2 more years is what it's going to take us to really do the transition. The voters get to pick who comes into office, of course, but what that office has to offer someone who's not terribly skilled is very different now than what it should be. And so the effort that we're going to undertake over the next 18 months or so is to put in the mechanisms that are necessary for someone who doesn't have my skill sets to be able to be very successful. I write the budget, I write the budget spreadsheet. Both of you have seen all of that work. You've both covered my service in office fairly extensively over time. That is not something that one should expect their mayor to do. It just simply isn't fair. It isn't, you're not going to find people willing to do this kind of work who may always have those skill sets. So it's important that we bring that in. People certainly have a choice now, and they could select either of us, and they would get someone who's been doing the job very successfully for 15 years or someone who is new at the job. But I'm telling you that it would be very difficult for anyone new at the job today to be able to do the work. It will be much less difficult when the next term is ended. We've brought in the right kind of a finance director. She needs a little bit of seasoning, and I need to work with the planning department as we transition that secondary planner into the economic development side. We also need to take a look at what kind of additional staff assistance might be needed to take over for the myriad of other things that I'm doing. We're looking at procurement, and we have no one else in the community that's certified to do that besides me. So it's important work. The transition is necessary. I believe that there are people in the community that will run for an open seat that have better skill sets than my opponent.
Mr. Emerson?
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I have a lot of administrative experience, and which I would bring in. I've done my own business. Obviously, you all are well aware of that. I am been on the board of directors for FHBT Credit Union for 6 years before going in 2003 to the present Freedom Credit Union, which is a different name than it was Telephone Workers Credit Union. We have grown from a $321 million credit union to today a $470 million credit union with me as one of the board of directors. We've expanded from 2 locations. Today we have 8 branches. We do a budget. We have asset size, I said, of $470,000. We do the budget every year. That's one of the director's jobs, is to approve the budget. I have budget experience in Easthampton. When I was thrown into the mix in 1986, most of you probably know, I became acting chief back then. And it was in January. And the mayor knows what's due after that in January, your budget. I had no help. I had to produce my own budget, and I did. The budget is more than figures. There's also narratives to it, too. All the budgets have narratives, wants, reasons for them. In '86, I did my own budget, presented to then town hall, excuse me, and then also to town meeting. I was an elected town meeting member. That's the only other elected post I've ever had, was town meeting member. And if you remember, we had a closed town meeting. You had to be elected as a town meeting member. I presented my own budget at town meeting also, explained it, and it passed. And I've been with the chief now, I've been doing budgets with him, and the mayor knows that we'd present it together, we'd go over there. So I've experience in city budgets still to this day, presenting the police department budget. And all the other budgets are the same. They have narratives, requests, wants of all the departments, either manning or for expenses. And I am experienced, and I plan to continue. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Emerson, you get the next question.
Mr. Emerson, last month you took out nomination papers to run for mayor after first announcing your candidacy for city council. You've said a few times that supporters urged you to run for mayor. Did you feel in running for the council you were not yet qualified to be mayor? And shouldn't the desire to be the CEO of a city come more from a candidate himself?
Yes and no. I did get support, yes. But city council, if you remember, what I was running for was council at large, which is the entire community. It's the entire city. That's who I'd represent as a city councilor too. And with my experience and training, as I already told you, I have an associate's degree from HCC, I have a bachelor's degree from Winnick, and I have a master's degree from ASC. We had classes in administration, we had classes in management, and in doing budgets. And I feel that I am, and I come actually to you with much more administrative experience than our present mayor did when he ran the first time. You always have to start off at a job somewhere, and I'm ready for this job, and I have been educated and trained, and I have handled budgets. And I feel the mayor is beyond the budgets. We have a budget director now. I'll be the ambassador to this city. Looking out at all the people tonight, I'll be glad to represent you all over the community. I'll be in our community seeking your help. I'll be out of the community seeking help of others. I plan to be your ambassador. Mayor is more than just a budget. The mayor has to be a person who can communicate with the people, which I have that ability, and be a friendly face out there and mixing with the town, and that's what I plan to do. Thank you.
Mr. Tosnick.
When Don signed my nomination papers, we had a conversation, and I can't quote it directly, but essentially he told me he was looking forward to learning the ropes. He wanted to spend a couple of years on the council, talked about maybe retiring to Florida. You have a home in Florida. I was very supportive. I think I signed his nomination papers for city council. The charter requires the mayor to be the head of the budget. State law requires the mayor to submit the budget. We don't do anything without the budget. So to shrug off the budget to someone else's responsibility is not appropriate. I wouldn't want my mayor to do that. Writing a budget 25 years ago for a department that was funded at about probably a third of what it's funded now does not a budget expert make. And approving the budget of a credit union is very much like the city council approves the budget of the mayor. So the skill sets are good, they just don't relate to this executive level position. It is important to be out there, to be the cheerleader of the community, to be out and available, and I do that all the time. Most of you have seen me in a bunch of different places. I sometimes go to places that they don't want me to be at. But I go because that's my job. I'm the mayor of everyone. And even if I go to an event where the people who are sponsoring are not necessarily thrilled to see me, I go because I'm the mayor of the community. And that's important. And it is important to be the figurehead and the champion of the community. But it's more important to instill the trust and respect of your department heads, the people that actually deliver the services. And we have very tight budgets, but we don't have bickering. We don't have the fiefdoms that we remember at town meeting. And when we do a budget, it's everyone's budget. And when we're done with it, all of the staff are comfortable that we've done the best that we can.
Mr. Tosnick, the next question is yours.
In a tight economic climate, you have supported projects intended to bring in money, but that are not always popular. Some examples are a Stop and Shop supermarket on Route 10, and a casino in Western Massachusetts. Where do the expressed wishes of the residents rank in your decision-making process?
Actually, they rank very high, but it's really hard the expressed wishes of the community when the community is divided on the issue. So you really have to depend a lot on the public process that we go forward in any of these. You mentioned Stop and Shop, and that, as you know, is a special permit process. The first Stop and Shop special permit was denied. It was proposed to have essentially three lots in one. Planning board determined that wasn't appropriate, that didn't fit. There was a lot of citizen input for that project, and there was a lot of citizen input for the second Stop and Shop project, which pared the proposal back to a single store, which was allowed under zoning. So sometimes the law has to trump the wishes of some, or even potentially a majority. We are a society of laws. We need to make sure that if the laws are wrong, that we change them, but when the laws are in place, it's our job to enforce those laws. And if the planning board looks at a proposal like a Stop and Shop and says, this fits the zoning law, this is legal, we should issue this permit, and they issue the permit, I know that some people aren't going to be happy, but it is the law that we operate under. The City Council has the responsibility of being our legislative body, and if they see things that need to be changed, they should, could, and have changed. And so the citizen input is really important during the process. We shouldn't just reject all growth, and I know that no one's suggesting that, and we shouldn't embrace all growth, because I don't think anyone would actually suggest that, because some growth is not good. Some growth is not healthy. But when we have a commercial corridor, and we have someone who wants to propose a commercial activity, we should welcome them with open arms if it fits our laws.
Thank you. Mr. Emerson, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you. We do have zoning laws and ordinances that apply, and I agree with any kind of business that would fit into an area legally and embrace those businesses. We lost Big Y, we all know that. And as a police officer, we still have the problems of the Big Y. At times when there is problems there, we respond there too. So it's not really any savings to the community. We lost it just by a few feet, and I'd hated to see that happen. I was in favor of the second plan with Stop and Shop, and being the captain of the police department, the chief and I looked over the plans and actually we attended some of the studies. We actually saw the traffic studies in motion, and all those proved that there would not be a traffic problem. So we did recommend it actually officially from the police department, because looking, they had the cars actually moving, which cars were going to Stop and Shop were a certain color, and other cars were passing through a different color. And it was quite well done actually, and it did not hurt the traffic flow on Northampton Street. That's one thing we did look into. If it did hurt the traffic flow, then our opinion would have been different. But since it didn't, we did back the Stop and Shop. From our end, if you know, when plans go out for subdivisions even, all the departments get to sign off on it now, police, fire. That's been in law for many years. And we did say that the traffic flow wouldn't hurt. Seeing the plans back then, if you are aware of them, there was actually turn-in lanes for Stop and Shop, and a light and a crossing lane on the other side by Cernex with a turn-down lane too. So it would have been 4 lanes right there with the turn-off lanes. And the lights would have helped people get in and out of Stop and Shop and also into Mr. Cernex's business. That's how I feel about it. Thank you.
Mr. Emerson, you have the next question. Before you ask it, I am aware our 8th grade needs to leave, and we'll pause the program after the next exchange of questions so that you guys can leave quietly. All right, so, Mr. Emerson, the next question is yours.
Mr. Emerson, you have attended only one city council meeting this year, and it was after you took out nomination papers to run for an at-large seat. Last month, at the announcement of your candidacy, I asked you why you didn't attend. You said, quote, "I've been at city council meetings many times over the years. Granted, I haven't been going, but I'm well experienced," end quote, and pointed out that in your role on the police force, you addressed the council many times. Please explain further why you don't attend and how you stay up to date with issues in the city.
Thank you. For one, in the Gazette, I keep up with it, the goings on in town, and people, talking to people in town. That's where I'm getting the issues from, the citizens. And my reason, I've answered this before, I have gone to city council. I used to go to the selectmen's meeting every week when I was acting chief, and went quite often back then. Attended town meetings. I've attended many city council meetings and represented the police department, and some of the mayor knows that. And with some issues we've had, attended the finance committee meetings, the city council finance committee meetings, presenting our budget to the finance committee division of the city council. And I do know the councilors quite well. Many of them some are friends of mine. So I do keep up on the issues. Just because I didn't attend city council meetings constantly doesn't mean that I'm not aware of what's happening in Easthampton. I think now I'm aware of what's happening in Easthampton more than ever. And as a police officer, you're also aware back then as captain and a policeman, and you always know what's happening in the city. You know every stone in the city, you know every side street, you know every alley, and you know people. And you don't even know sometimes their names, but you know where they live. So I do have a good pulse in the city. Just because I don't attend city council doesn't mean I don't know what's going on in the city.
I don't necessarily know where you live, nor do I want to. I fought to have a role at the city council meeting. This charter created an adversarial relationship between the city council and the mayor, and I spent the first 2 years fighting to change that. We didn't change the charter, but we changed the way we worked. So now the city council gives the mayor an opportunity at every meeting to speak, to present information. You have to attend city council meetings if you want your government to be effective. There's no other way around it. Absolutely not. So many things happen at a council meeting or at a subcommittee meeting that have nuances that you can't pick up from. I mean, you guys are great writers, but you can't pick that up from a newspaper article. And there's only so much paper because the advertising is low, so most of the real story never gets in. And this isn't a slam against the newspapers, but it's the nature of where it is. You have to be there. You have to understand where all of the various city council members are. We have a wonderful master plan. It's got input from probably about 250 people who spent weeks and weeks and months over essentially, it started as a visioning process in 2003, so it was about a 5-year process. That contains a whole lot of stuff that the city councilors aren't necessarily aware of. So when the mayor presents something, he needs to be there to present it. Whether it's an appointment or whether it's a code, we just put a code in to try to fix a problem with some appointed folks not getting information about conflict of interest laws, or whether it's just to get a sense as to what the look on their face is when you present them, when they're presented with a particular issue. It really is a human. It's a human interaction at the council meetings, and the mayor needs to be there, and the mayor and anyone who wants to run for mayor ought to have been a city councilor, in my opinion.
Thank you. This is a good juncture to pause for a moment. I want to thank our 8th grade for their attention. Good work, guys. We've got time for 4 or 5 of these.
Okay.
We've got time for 4 or 5.
Do they have to take a test on this?
I don't know. All right, we now have time for a few of the questions submitted by so many of you in the audience. We've pre-screened them to try to eliminate duplicates and questions that were not appropriate for both candidates. Again, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond, and Mr. Emerson, you're up first.
Yes.
This is a question from, I believe, Stanley McCoy of Easthampton. What do you plan for the future of Easthampton to maintain our green community standard?
I realize we're a green community with the changes in street lighting and the efforts that have been done to make us a green community. I will keep up those same efforts. I agree with that, and as I said before, my personal life, we've done that too. We've changed our lights at home and looking into solar, and I will support our green community that is presently green. In the future, I don't know why anybody would be against that. The money savings is tremendous, and the future of Easthampton depends on that. Our children and our grandchildren need a clean environment. So I'm in 100% in favor of being a green community in the future, now and in the future. Thanks.
The key in that question, I think, is maintaining the standard. The Green Communities Act provides some fairly significant incentives. We're spending $170,000 for those LED lights that Don mentioned, and I was able to get a $50,000 grant from Western Mass Electric Company, so we've essentially saving about 174,000 kilowatt hours of power a year. That turns into about $36,000 a year with that LED light changeover. The Green Communities Act is much more than just changing light bulbs or changing LED lights. It also means that we need to look at our fleet standards, and we need to maintain better fleet standards year to year to year. And that's very difficult when you have equipment that you need that is not the standard. I'm going to take my mid-size car and turn it into a compact car. Well, you can't do that very well with a police cruiser or an ambulance. And so we need to look at what our vehicle mix is. We need to be aware of that. As we begin to capitalize, we need to understand that our decision-making has to be much more creative than it was in the past. I mentioned ambulances. I was talking to Chief Motter yesterday. We're looking at lease options and what kind of new ambulances are out there. The new Ford F-450s, the chassis that is under our current ambulances, only comes with a V10 gas engine, which is terribly inefficient. And so we're looking at maybe going to a different chassis, an International Harvester. And my first question, of course, is what about fuel economy? Is it better than the standard chassis that we're using? Can we go to the green communities and say, we're doing this and we're saving money? We're working right now with Siemens to put energy conservation into our buildings, and we're going to do that with any luck this coming year. And the 2 megawatts of solar is going wonderfully on the landfill. I would encourage you to take a drive out to the end of Oliver Street anytime you want. On Thursday, we're going to be doing a media tour, and so I think by the weekend, you'll see a lot more about that project. But we're proud to be a green community. It did mean a change in the building standards as well, and so we need to work with our tradespeople to make sure that that standard is upheld.
Right, Mr. Tosnick, the next question is for you first.
This is from an Easthampton resident, Eric Yates. As mayor, you also serve on the school committee. What are your top 3 priorities for education and our schools in Easthampton?
Money, money, and more money. The school committee is the authority over the policy and operations of the school department, as Eric knows, since he's a member of the committee with me. And the school committee's role is really to set those standards. The mayor's role is in budgeting, and I said money, 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 but I really mean that. My biggest input there is in writing the budget, and so back when I started 15 years ago, we were spending about 55% of our budget on education, and I thought that that was insufficient. We talked to the department heads. We had, over the course of 3 years, we had various meetings internally as we wrote budgets to try to come up with a standard that would be acceptable to everyone, that was good for the schools, but that didn't create strife or disagreement amongst the community like we had so many times as a town. And that process led us to dedicating about 2/3 of all of our available general fund revenue to education. And that 2/3 is a standard that we were able to achieve in 5 years, and we've kept that standard. Now, that doesn't mean that the schools get more money than they need, and in fact, by having a standard, it really means that when we have to contract, so does the school department. But it gets us to a level playing field where everyone works together, and that's really the key. Those of you that are business people, you know that. Your organization has to work as one. It can't be fighting internally. It can't be upset because some other department got something better. We've established that. We have wonderful relations. The school department is now looked up to by everyone, and no one resents the money that the school department gets.
Mr. Emerson, your response?
Yes, thank you. As a 1/7 voting member of the school committee, I would attend obviously all the school committee meetings and participate in the meetings and work closely with all the committee members to come up with solutions to why the kids are leaving Easthampton at the rate that they are. We have a lot of kids leaving Easthampton. The difference is 188 children per year leave our community. Then pick Easthampton schools. and the return money for every people that we have money coming back in is about $380,000. So the mayor said before it's 1.8. I just had the figures last night. It's 1.3 million is the difference between what we pay out and what we get back in. So with that said, I would work closely with the school committee to see why they're leaving, maybe some increased studies, and work closely with them with completing the high school, which obviously has an owner's manager who takes care of the daily running of the building of the school. So I would also attend all the school meetings and also check on the progress of the high school on a daily basis to make sure that everything's being done correctly and within budget. And that's why I look at it and working out the budget with the school committee and working closely with it. All part of my communicating with people and working closely with people. I think I can work with any group of people, any committee. Thank you.
Question for Mr. Emerson first, please.
Question from Lynn Knudsen or Knudsen of Easthampton. Are you considering the small farm movement, which will provide local organic food, jobs, and a boost to our clean environment?
Could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah. Are you considering the small farm movement, which will provide local organic food, jobs, and a boost to our clean environment?
Thank you. We now have a large farm on East Street right near me that grows products for people that come and pick them up all the time. I see that. I'm in favor of farms, but obviously farmers are in trouble now, and we're losing farms. We used to have dairy cattle in Easthampton on East Street and other locations in Easthampton. We've lost all that. But I would obviously be in favor of any type of farming, and if you could make a livelihood out of it, that'd be good. The one on is a community type thing, the one on East Street, where people go, and I see them going to pick up their products because they're a member of that community. And I'm in complete agreement. I grow my own vegetables. My garden gets bigger every year, but I have lucky enough to have some East Street property that has great soil, and every year the garden gets bigger and bigger. Probably half an acre now, and I hand toil out there, and I grow vegetables for my family and friends and grow enough to give away. So I am obviously in favor of organic farms. This year, I use no pesticides on my farm, on my garden whatsoever. There's been years that I have. This year I've used none. And you all know we had trouble this year with the rain, so I lost some pumpkin and butternut squash. But I grow my own garden, and I would obviously be in favor of any farming in Easthampton. Thank you.
I'd like to have that farm on Park Street that you bulldozed into houses. Small farm movement is very important. We can feed our population on small farms. We don't have to have factory farms. The idea that we have to truck our food in from California because we happen to want to buy those kinds of vegetables that they grow specially to be able to sit in a truck for a week is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. So I'm supportive of the small farm movement. I am probably the biggest backer in the room of protecting open space. I noticed my opponent calls it free space. It's not free, and it's got a purpose. Just because it doesn't have a house on it or a building on it doesn't mean that it's useless. So open space is important. Farmland is a huge part of our open space. We've saved Park Hill. Those are small family farms on Park Hill. We're working with the last operating farm up there to try to get them to consider going forward with protection mechanisms. Park Hill was the site of our original town farm, and it's still there, and we preserved that 50 acres. Now that land is used for hay at this point because we don't have strong vegetable farmers. But if we did, we'd be able to look at that and say, well, instead of going into hay, let's go into crop. Let's go into ways to feed people instead of animals. But you feed the animals. Currently, Mr. Chickwin does feed his animals off that property, and he harvests the beef. So eventually, we do get it to the table. But the small farm movement is important, and I support it. And we just not sort of related, but we're also talking to our internal committees about improving the farm. The farm stand that we currently have now. We currently have a farmer's market that isn't as strong as it could be, and we're looking at ways to improve that so that we'll be able to increase the access to locally grown food here in Easthampton.
Those were great questions, and I wished we had time for more of them, but we are committed to ending on time. So we're going to go ahead to closing statements. Mr. Tosnick, by virtue of the coin toss, you get the first closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Teller, and I want to thank everyone for coming. I really do enjoy these events. I'm going to be on Channel 57 at the end of the week. I've just committed to be on Channel 22, and I think the two of us are going to be on Channel 40. So I really would ask you to reconsider the Channel 22 opportunity, because people want to hear this stuff. Political campaigns are hard. It's one of the things I like least about my job. They get magnified by emotions, and the political upheaval that's happening in our society kind of make the issues in front of us look almost insurmountable. And it's like, well, you know, that wasn't a good answer. This isn't a good answer. It really is my belief that we need to look at one thing in a community, and that's creating a strong, successful, healthy, and positive Easthampton. And I believe that I've done that for 15 years. Since my first term as mayor, this town has grown and changed and is so much better than it was then. Our historic mills are back to life. We've become essentially the high watermark for innovative energy. We're building the first solar landfill, and people are copying it already. We just started 3 weeks ago, and communities are getting on board, and they want to build these. It makes nothing but sense. It's land that we can't use for any purpose, and it can do wonderful things, creating green energy without a carbon footprint. But the problem that we have to be aware of is the more successful that we get, the more diligent we need to be about protecting that success and being careful that we don't give it away. I would really encourage you to take a look at mayormike.net, click on the video link, and look at an hour and 40 minutes or an hour and 30 minutes of video that we've produced on all kinds of subjects. I can't give you that much here. I'm limited to the 2 minutes. I want to tell you that I have a proven track record of accomplishments. I've got a positive attitude and a willingness to serve my community each and every day. Thank you.
Well timed. Mr. Emerson, your closing statement,
Yes.
please.
Thank you very much. And thank you all again for being here tonight. It's great to see this many people here interested in Easthampton. It's not easy to take on an incumbent mayor. However, I have a new vision for our community that takes a different route from our present mayor. I see vacant stores, fronts, vacant buildings, empty buildings. Some have had fires in them, as you know. There's been some successes and there's been some failures in our mills. Kids leaving our elementary schools, we find that's the level that they leave at for school of choice. Why? People in the business community feeling left out in Easthampton. The elderly worried about having enough money to survive. And our public employees feeling like nobody will listen to them. Well, as your mayor, I hear your concerns. Working together, we will solve them. Communications will be a two-way street, not a one-way street. My door will be open, even on Fridays. I will be Easthampton's ambassador, as I said many times, to attract new industry, new jobs. I will lead the way for new business to locate here in Easthampton. I'll talk with CEOs of struggling companies that are here now to make sure that they stay in our community. Being mayor is about being an effective leader and getting results. And it's about the personal connection government has with the people. Together, we can do all these things, but I need your help, and I need your vote on November 8th. Change is coming, and join me to be part of it. I sincerely thank you tonight for being here.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to thank both Mr. Emerson and Mr. Tosnick for an informative, engaging, and I'm happy to say very civil evening. I think we've all seen what passes for political discourse in other communities, and I knew we were better than that. So I think you all deserve congratulations yourselves for encouraging this format of a debate. Thank you both. One of the privileges of living in a free society is our ability to discuss our differences in a civil forum. Another privilege is our ability to vote, and it's not just a privilege, it's a responsibility. And I think I can speak for both candidates in urging each of you to cast a ballot on November 8th. If you are not yet registered to vote, the deadline is tomorrow evening. And the city clerk's office is actually going to be staying open late until 8 o'clock to accommodate you. It's as simple as going down there and filling out a very brief form. So please, please, please vote. Don't leave the choice to someone else. That's the end of my editorial for the evening. Thank you all for coming.